Hi there, my name is Miles, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a flower in Maya. So as a very general overview, we're going to start today with a cube, and we're going to turn that into a petal as I explain all the transform controls. We're then going to UV map our petal using the UV editor, and we'll go over that process. We're not going to texture today. I'm just not going to worry about it. Once that's done, once it's all UV mapped, we are going to change the pivot and duplicate special to get that sort of radial flower shape, and then we can add a center. So it's a basic model, but it has a lot of important 3D modeling techniques. And I think it makes a user really familiar with moving things around in Maya and how to navigate. So with that, let's start with our cube. We're going to create polygon primitives and select cube. To make this the shape we want, we're going to go up to the channel box / layer editor, rename it to petal, so that if we're ever looking for this specific cube, we know it's our petal. And the width, the height, and the depth correspond to the X, the Y, and the Z axes. So if I want it to be tall, that's the Y axis, and I can press 2, and it'll get taller. If I want it to be skinnier, I can go to the depth, and I can make it a fraction, like 0.2. And that gives us a tall, skinny base to work off of. Now, you might notice that the only things that we can play with or modify are the 4 corners of our cube, and petals are a lot more organic than that. They need a little bit more geometry. So this is why we have to add subdivisions. A subdivision will go in and it will create a edge loop around your model so that everywhere where it creates an edge, there will be a new vertex that you can modify, scale, play with, all that good stuff. So I think we can go with 2 for the width so that we have a nice line down the center. We know where the center of our object is, and maybe 3 for the height. I'll make it 4. Alrighty, so that still doesn't solve the problem that our model is currently just a long rectangle, now with more geometry. So to change these vertices, we have to right-click and drag into vertex mode. From here, you can select each vertex individually, or you can right-click or left-click and drag to select all of these at once. So now we're going to get into the actual transforms of the vertices. To transform up and down or left and right, you can hit W, and that will bring up these little arrows. If you want to rotate the points around, you can use E, and that will bring up this big circle. If you want to scale things in and out, down and up, which we want to do, you're going to use R. Let me just move to get a better view. So each of these handles corresponds to a different axis, and right now we just want to make this nice and skinny. And you can see here, like that's the start of our petal. It's still a bit too Minecraft for my taste, so we're going to move and go to the bottom and scale these ones down. And it's like, all right, we're already looking a little bit more petally. Take this one and I'll scale this one down. And maybe I'll scale this one up. That looks a bit too leafy, so I'll scale that one down and maybe this one up. There's no hard and fast rules. It's whatever you think would be good. And now that you know how to modify a vertex, if you wanted to change the shape of the whole bottle, you could also select everything at once. Or you could right click and drag and go into object mode again, which is what we started with, and that changes the whole model at once too. So say we want it to be a little bit taller and skinnier, like a sunflower petal. There we go. Now you'll notice that our petal is still pretty blocky. As nice and smooth as all the edges are, that hasn't stopped everything from being sharp and sort of not pretty enough yet. To see the model as it would be if it was really smooth, if you hit 3 on your keyboard, that shows you the smooth preview of your model. And you can see here, that's much more like what we want. This isn't the actual geometry of your model. If you select your object and go into 1, you'll go back to seeing the actual geometry. It's just what your model would look like if it was super smooth. And so for the rest of this, I will put it in smooth mode. I think that we should do a nice crease down the center and a little bit of wiggle to the petal, just so that it looks more natural and less artificial. To add the crease, we're going to have to add an edge loop. Sort of like creating the subdivisions, this will help us have more geometry to move. So I specifically want subdivisions around the edge, or I want edge loops. I want edge loops around the center edge, because if I wanted to create that crease right now and I move to the center with W, it moves the whole thing, and that's a little bit too dramatic. Maybe a little bit of that, but then I want this to be a lot sharper. So sorry, I am going very fast, but so to re-explain, moving just this edge loop is really, really dramatic, and it moves everything along. To make something more subtle while we're smoothing it, we need more vertices. To make more vertices, we add an edge loop. To add an edge loop, we are going to shift and right click and then drag all the way down here to insert edge loop tool. So you can see this sort of blue ghostly shell. That's our original model. So if you hit 1, we can go back to seeing how it actually looks, and back to 3 to see how it looks right now. So you can already see that when we add 1, everything sort of shifts a little bit, and it's quite dramatic. I'll hit Q to get out of the edge loop mode, and then 1 to see our model again. Now, they were put exactly on the model where they should be, so they are not too dramatic. But now when we modify the center loop and move it back a tiny, tiny bit and go back into 3 mode, we have a nice crease along the center. Alrighty. So now I'm going to add a little wave back and forth. I don't know if I explained how to make an entire edge loop, but to select an entire edge loop, you double click. And now I want to move this back. Actually, I want to move this one forward a little bit. Oh, I'm moving on the wrong axis. You can tell because of the front. I want to move it forward on the bottom and a little bit backwards on top, just to make it a little bit more lively. Yeah, just like that. Okay. Now, a gray flower isn't particularly exciting, so we want to add a bunch of fun colors and patterns to it. But in order to draw on our model, we need to have some sort of 2D representation. Our 2D representation will be our UVs. So if you click on UV editor, by default, the UV shell of our petal is the same one from when we had it as a cube. This is the front face, this is the left side, this is the right side, top, back face, and the bottom. It's sort of how you'd make an origami cube. This is the unfolding of the 3D shape. When we're making our UVs, we want to try and preserve the shape of the petal so that when we draw on it, it makes sense and we know where we're drawing. So if you wanted to add like a cool spotted pattern going from the bottom to the top, you could just do that and you would understand which parts of your model were the bottom and the top without having to constantly refer back here. So I'm going to go back into 1 mode so we can see our actual vertices. And we're going to just delete all of these. So actually UV shell delete. Then we're going to go into create. And you can choose any one of these. They'll all give you different results based on which algorithm they use to figure things out. I'll do planar. Oop, didn't select my object. Planar. Because you can see this is the perfect shape of one of our petals. However, it has no edges. And as a result, our edges look really, really janky. Can't do anything with those. So we're going to go into the edge mode, and we're going to start cutting and sewing different edges together to make our actual shape. To cut an edge, you double click the whole edge loop, go under cut and sew, and cut. And once we have at least one seam, we'll be able to start unfolding our model. Over here, we'll select the back one, cut. This one, cut. And these 2. Cut and cut. To make things easier for our model, I'll also do the center edge loop and I'll cut it down there so that we can cut the sides in half evenly. And now I'll select all of my UV shells and I will choose under unfold, unfold. This gives us a real flatten out of them. And it looks a little bit wet and janky. So you can see these are the 2 halves of our back. So one of them is really small and it looks like it has a really big cubes, and the other is really big, so it looks like it has really small cubes. So we'll scale those up to around the same size and then sew them back together using edge mode. Go edge, we'll select one, and you can see that since this is the same edge on the model, both are selected here. We'll then go stitch together and they'll stitch themselves all the way over. And we stitch together and we stitch. We keep going. So here, these are all nicely organized. We'll just sew our way down. If we wanted to be fancy, we could sew the sides to one of the front or the back, depending on how we wanted our petal to look. Could be helpful, but I don't mind leaving them just like this. And there we go, our basic UV shell. So I'll turn off the checker map so you can see what I did better. And if we want to take this into Photoshop or your favorite image editing program, you'll hit this camera and you'll choose PNG and what size you want. 500 by 500 is a really good for like demo projects, but for more professional work, you'll end up going larger and larger and getting more and more details in those pixels. So if you press apply and close, it'll save to that location. I'm not worried about exporting it for right now, so I'll just close it off. There we go. Our flower is all ready for the next stage of its life, which is to become a flower. Go into object mode. And you might have noticed that so far, all of our transforms, like the moving and the scaling, have all been around the center of the model. When we're making a petal, we want it to be much lower so that we can rotate it just around one center. To change where that pivot is, we're going to press the D key and it'll add this special transform, and you'll see that the center of the model is highlighted in yellow. We can just move it down the y-axis to a little bit past where our flower center, or where our flower's bottom is. And that's where we want the center of the flower. Now from here, we can either use Command D to duplicate, and then we go back into E mode and we rotate the petal, or we can do it much faster. So I'll delete this. I'll go back into 3 mode so we can see our pretty petal too. And we'll go into Create or Edit, Duplicate Special. Now we're going to run it through the option box, which is using this here. And running it through the option box allows us to choose a whole lot of specific parameters about the geometry, how things are grouped, and when you duplicate it, how it's moved. So for example, I want a flower with 6 petals, and it's going to go rotating it around in a circle around the z-axis, which is our middle over here. So to have 6 petals, I'm going to put them 60 degrees apart, because 360, the amount of degrees in a circle, divided by 6, the amount of petals we want, is 60. So we could have more, we could have less. It just takes a quick little bit of math. So now I'll hit Duplicate Special, and you'll see all of our petals have aligned around. So from here, I can say, maybe I don't like how my petals look, and I could undo it. And I could change things around and then reduplicate. So let's make them a little bit wider. Yeah, a little bit smaller. And then edit, duplicate special, make sure all our settings are the same, and duplicate special. Yeah, I like this one. Actually, I think, oh, I had to redo my flower, so I didn't add the same little wave. And here's where I think it would look really good, because it's nice and much more lively. I'll add that wave back in. Now we can duplicate special. There we go. That's the liveliness I'm looking for. To create the center of the petal, we're going to create polygon primitives and create a cube again. We'll immediately start by hitting the 3 key so that it smooths itself out into a nice round circle. You can put that in. We can start squishing and squashing it so that it makes a good center for our flower. All right. I think that looks quite nice. All right. Thank you for joining me. I know that this is quite a complex, simple tutorial, but I think it's really great and it can be expanded in a whole bunch of different ways. I could imagine using the same sort of techniques I used to create the flower petal to teach someone how to make cool swords, and then bringing in more hard surface modeling in order to make handles. I can teach using curves to make the flower stems. We can bring it into shader graph to make it sway in the wind in Unity, or we could use Maya's own node-based shader editor to create new effects for the flower petals. The possibilities are really endless. Thank you so much for listening. Have a nice night.